right, everybody, welcome back. A big welcome back to the Pennsylvania and Berwind. Today, we are going to be doing some major reconstruction here at the Grafton yard, which is, I think it's the northeasternmost end of the P&B. It's the opposite side of where Juniata is. That's all you need to know. It's the other end. So we're going to be doing a major overhaul of this section. We're gonna be doing this over the next few episodes, so we're just gonna kind of rough in a lot of stuff today. We're gonna cover a lot of ground, and pretty much everything that you see here is gonna be gone, except for the yard itself. I didn't touch that yet. We're gonna get into that in the next few episodes, but today we're mostly gonna be working on these industries that surround this area. As you can see, I've already blanked everything out. I've deleted all the scenery that is there, removed some of the track. Actually, I don't think I've removed the track yet, but the scenery is all gone. Now we're going to start the process of removing some of this track, and we are going to relay a lot of track through here, and we're really going to extend the P&B by a few miles. And when I got started on this build, in typical Joe fashion here, I told myself I was going to keep it simple, and I was going to keep it very rural, and I didn't want to do some kind of big city sort of thing. And of course, what do I end up doing? I end up building a very dense, sprawling industrial zone. You'll see by the end of this. It's actually... it's going to be really cool. I think it's probably, so far, it's one of my favorite areas on the P&B that I've laid out to date, I think. And it's sort of, once again, putting another notch in the belt, or leveling up the P&B again to another, like, quality standard, where I feel like this build is just gonna stand out from everything else that I've done so far because it's just so different. But we'll see how I can get it all to blend together. At this point, I've just resigned myself to really caring at all about how the continuity of this route is gonna vary from one section to the next. I guess maybe that's part of what is gonna make it very notable and very interesting. So anyway, what we're going to be working on here is a few of the industries that exist around Grafton, and on the original P&B, this was Grafton Dockside, I believe was the name of the area, and it was a pretty simple industrial area with a receiver for steel. I think the Allegheny steel, I'm trying to make words here. One of the industries receives the steel that is made in Allegheny, that's what I'm trying to say. We also have an industry that is going to produce some general goods for us. And we have a grain industry, which I have to double check, but I'm pretty sure it receives grain from Shawnee, which is out by Allegheny. So I'd have to double check that just to make sure, but that's what I'm going to go with for now. So we've got about 3 or 4 industries that we're going to work with. Oh, and then the big one, the biggest one, the 2 biggest ones. Wow, I'm actually forgetting the actual namesake areas here. there is a big coal dock, which is what I'm working on here. On the original P&B, it was designed a little bit different. It was one of those coal docks where the train would pull out onto like a big bridge and dump the coal down into some things that would then load onto ships. I'm going to do it a little bit different, but the concept will still be the same. And the other big industry that we're going to work on a little bit today is like a recycling plant or a garbage processing facility. I don't really know what to call it, but it takes those garbage flats that JR has. So they don't originate from anywhere else on the route, and this is one of those rare exceptions, I think, on the P&B where the goods that are going to be consumed here don't actually originate anywhere on the P&B. They have to be brought in from interchange traffic. So that's just another thing to integrate into this. So again, one of the main viewing, or whatever you call it, one of the main features here is this large lake. And in my head, I'm kind of imagining this as Lake Erie, even though it doesn't necessarily make geographical sense in the context of the P&B. But basically all I can say is don't try to put the P&B into real life anywhere geographically. It's not going to make any bit of sense. And I'm okay with that. I can't, we're way too far along in this project to try to correct that path. But anyway, I'm imagining this as being Lake Erie, so some of the facilities that are up here would be either producing or consuming materials and things like that are probably going to be coming from Canada or other industries or other locations that are along the Great Lakes. I don't really know what the transportation pipeline looks like up that way, so I'm just kind of using my imagination. But for the sake of this conversation, you could just picture this as Lake Erie and this being sort of a transload facility for rail to barge or barge to rail or ship or whatever you want to call it. So my method for this build is kind of a little bit different. I changed things up. Instead of, I don't even know how to describe what my other build style was previously, but in this particular build today, I'm doing this more like a city skylines build, so we could refer to this as Trainz skylines. How's that sound? I begin by laying out all of the roads, and well, obviously I did the terraforming first, laid out where I was going to put my waterways and where I was going to put my hills and mountains and land masses and that sort of thing. And then I pretty much had an idea of where I wanted different parts of the industry to exist, and sort of like what the overall structure of this, I'm not even going to call it a town because it's not really a town, but this little development is actually going to look like. So I began by laying out all of the roads and the bridges, and I think my big inspiration really was all these bridges that I'm laying out. I got really excited when I found some of these bridges, and I don't know why, I've just been really inspired by bridges lately and that kind of thing. And again, that kind of goes into my whole idea of visual noise and bringing in lots of different things that break up the sameness of trees or buildings or anything like that. It's just have some kind of texture to a scene. So I do that with things like these power lines here, and in this particular build, some of these bridges. We're going to add a lot of aerial type structures, bridges, power lines, cranes, and things like that. And yeah, work that into this area. But again, I did begin by laying out some of the infrastructure, and then I begin to rough in where some of the buildings are going to go. So I believe I get into that in a few moments here. But again, everything that I do is going to be subject to change. You know, I can come back and change any of this at any time. And don't doubt for 1 second that I might not change all these roads to, or I might actually change all these roads to hand-laid roads. I already started to do it in some areas. I'm trying to avoid it just to keep myself from going way too far down that rabbit hole. But it is possible in the industrial areas. I might just bring them into hand-laid road territory, because it just looks better when you have a lot of parking lots and things like that. So that's, you know, whatever. That can change at any moment. So at this clip here, I'm beginning to lay out an area that I eventually turn into a little residential neighborhood. And I thought that this would be a really cool contrast between having all these industries surrounding this island, and on the island is like a little development, little neighborhood with some really nice houses. I actually used the house assets that I brought into the game from my patrons a couple of months ago, so you get a good look at those in this video, in this segment in a few moments. And so I was looking a lot at Ashtabula, I believe it's pronounced, Ashtabula, Ohio, for inspiration on Google Earth. Ashtabula, I don't know how to say it. But I've been looking at that, and then the next door city to it, Conway, whatever. I don't know how to pronounce any of these things. But if you go to Google Earth and you look at these towns via satellite, you'll kind of see where I was getting my inspiration from, where there's these big sweeping industries with tracks kind of cutting through some of these waterway areas and some of these neighborhoods and stuff like that. But predominantly the area is actually surrounded by residential neighborhoods. So I did want to have this sort of busy industrial area, but I did want to surround it with some trees and shrubs and some houses and stuff like that. I'm kind of getting into this realm of building where I don't necessarily just want to build the trackside scenes. And I think my build style has been trending in that direction for the past like year or two, maybe since like the debev, so maybe a couple of years. But what I'm finding is, originally I wanted to just model anything that was right next to the tracks because that's all you would really see. But over the years, I've sort of come to the conclusion that I really enjoy just laying out like entire towns and cities and these big sprawling areas so that it feels more like a full-size area that you can explore and photograph from and get these great views and stuff like that. So that's been, I guess, where my head is at with some of these builds, and I'm going to try to continue on that path for the foreseeable future. And we'll see just how sustainable it is, because it does require building a whole lot of more stuff. So we'll see how I end up doing with that, but that's sort of where my head is at with that. So at this point, we are beginning to relay some of the track in the industrial area here, really stretching things out, making the track spurs a little bit longer, and this will probably make things a little bit more interesting when it comes down to switching. So you might have some short locals working these really long spurs for like 1 or 2 industries. And for some reason, I don't know, that just kind of sounds kind of cool to me. And I mean, when I say small industries, I'm talking about the warehouse and the steel receiving plant that's going to be here. The garbage facility and where the coal unloading area are going to be pretty big, as can be suggested by the small yard that I put here. Again, using that place in Ohio as my inspiration, wanted to have the tracks next to the water and have a small yard. I mean, in Ashtabula, there's a pretty sizable yard there. There's probably 30 tracks or something like that. We don't need that much space here. In fact, 4 tracks might even be a bit overkill for the amount of coal that is being produced along the P&B, but you know what? Still, I'm cool with it. I think it's going to add some really cool visual interest and operational interest to this line, and make for some pretty big unit trains, I think, and that's going to be really cool. So here I wanted to make sure that the escape track could hold at least 3 locomotives, so we filled that there. I might need to expand that a little bit further, maybe for 4 locomotives or 5, but you know, that's where I'm at right now. And again, so in this episode, we're not going to get a whole lot of like detailing and stuff done. I do get some scenery work done and some other building stuff done. But for the most part, I spend this episode outlining everything, figuring out where stuff is going to go, and just getting that big picture rough draft kind of thrown down. And you'll see in some of the areas that I kind of get started in, I just throw a few assets down here and there, and they're just kind of like placeholders for me to remember, okay, I want to come back and do this thing here, or I want to do that there, or I wanted to use this asset or that asset, you know? So they're kind of like little bookmarks for me to just remember what the heck I'm trying to do and where. So if it looks like I'm not like completing a scene or I'm just sort of throwing stuff down, it's because I am, but I'm going to come back to it. It's really just for me to remember what I'm doing. So at this point, I'm softening up the shoreline just using the plateau tool. I got the sensitivity turned up pretty high, and this is a good way to get your shoreline to just have like a nice gradual tapering edge down into the water, so it's not like a drop off or anything like that. And I do a lot of that on all the shoreline around here, around all these houses and that sort of thing. But I do that off camera. You guys don't need to see me, you know, do absolutely everything in these builds. So I try to give you an overview of, you know, where my thought process is and what some of my techniques are and stuff like that without going way too in depth with any of it. So again, I'm just working in some of the infrastructure here, some of the roadways, building just a small grid. I don't even know if you could call it a grid, but I'm just laying out a couple roads here and there, and then I'm going to put some houses down on them, and, you know, we'll fill in the rest of the area with trees. The negative space is just going to get filled in with trees and shrubs and grasses and stuff like that. And I think that is going to make for a pretty realistic looking like scenic division for each area, I guess you could call it. I mean, if you look at Google and you look at satellite imagery of neighborhoods and even in big industrial areas that it feels like it's just all paved over, there are still areas of scenery that sort of break things up a little bit and create these meridians, or what am I trying to say? Just these like division points where things are, you know, segregated from one part to another, and it's like a line of trees and shrubs or like a stream bed or something like that. So I'm trying to add in a lot of that in this particular build. And, you know, I mean, just spending a lot of time looking at Google Earth, just that's the kind of ideas that I get, I guess. All right, so now we are back over here at the garbage processing facility, and again, this is an industry that I am absolutely not familiar with how it works whatsoever. I've been looking at a few real-life industries on Google, as usual. In particular, there's one in the Bronx, just right at the south tip of the Bronx, right underneath the Triborough Bridge. I believe Train Sim World modeled it in their Northeast Corridor pack, or one of their expansion packs. But anyway, I was looking at that on Google Earth, so I kind of was drawing my inspiration from that. It's really hard to tell how these industries are, how they process the garbage or recyclables or whatever it is exactly that's being brought there, especially since these containers are like containers on a flat car. So I don't know if they take those containers off and then dump them and then put the empty container back on the flat car and then ship it back the same way, or if the flat cars end up just going back empty altogether without the container on them. I don't know. Maybe somebody can let me know in the comments like how that, the real life operation works. But as far as I could tell on Google, the train cars go in a building and they come out the other side and there's no garbage in them anymore. So that's kind of what I was going for here. And again, I'm trying to integrate a larger industrial complex into all this. So, it's not just the train cars coming into one building. I want this whole area to be like a processing area for recyclables and garbage, and I don't know if that's going to get loaded onto barges and shipped away or dumped into the lake or what, but right now I just kind of have it set up so it comes to this plant and maybe it just gets sorted and redistributed to other garbage facilities from there. I have no idea, but that's my thinking with that, my logic, and that's what I'm kind of imagining as happening. There you can see in the background are the houses. I guess I didn't film me placing them, or maybe I did and I just was talking over it about something else. But yeah, I wanted to work in some scenery, at least get a little bit of green in here while the episode is still going. And of course, this is a longer episode. Looks like we're almost at 30 minutes for this episode. And of course, I'm recording this right after I recorded the 50-minute Hudson and Western video that just went live on my channel. So if you guys haven't seen that, go check it out. It's a new build, new route. And again, in that same context of the Hudson and Western, I find myself building another port. This is kind of a port, and the Hudson and Western is a port, and then Port LA is a port. And it was actually kind of funny when I was working on this build. Mrs. AM came into my room and was just peeking at what I was working on. And she's like, "Oh, nice. Port LA looks like it's coming along pretty good." And I was like, "No, this isn't the Port LA. This is the P&B." So it's just like, oh man, all the routes are beginning to blend together into one big amalgamation. But anyway, I don't think that that's such a bad thing. That just means that I kind of feel like maybe my techniques and my build style is sort of starting to coalesce into a specific look or a style or whatever it might be. But it's starting to become a thing. So however you want to look at that, I look at it as a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. Maybe that means that I'm becoming formulaic with my builds. I don't know, but I'm happy with it. I think that the results so far are good. I like the Hudson and Western. The Port LA looks really great. This build is starting to look really good, and I can't wait for it to progress even further. Because obviously, when you're doing a build, it's really hard, especially I can only imagine from you guys' point of view. I can see this in my head. I know what it's going to look like when it's done, and I can only try to describe to you guys what I'm seeing or what I'm imagining. And unfortunately, at the end of the videos, I end up leaving you guys off with usually like a mostly unfinished part of a route, I guess. But, whatever. It's all work in progress, and you guys are here to see the work in progress and the progress of it, so... I have found when you're building a port and you want to make these kind of, I don't know what you call these, it's a dock, I guess, or, like a filled-in area, it's best to just work with the grid, as annoying as it can be and as, rigid as it feels. Trainz does not really allow you to have, really good vertical ledges on a diagonal. So if you're going to do a seaport or something like that, just build it on the 90-degree grid and don't, just forget about anything else, because it's just not going to work. It just, you can't modify the terrain on an angle properly. And then, when you start adding textures and stuff like that, everything gets kind of funky. But at this point in the video was kind of my quick attempt to begin to throw down some details, and I got a bit ahead of myself, I gotta say, with this. I shouldn't have begun detailing things. I think I just got to a point where I was still recording this video, and I was like, all right, maybe I should try to bring in some kind of detail work so the viewers will have some idea of what I'm going for here. But, it was too soon. I still need to figure out the rest of the infrastructure for this area, where buildings are going to go, where the roads are all going to go, where parking lots are going to go, and stuff like that. So you'll see in just a moment here, I kind of give up and move on from this, because it was just not, I'm not ready there. I'm not ready for this yet. So here's what I was talking about placing some stuff down just randomly really quick. I put down those scrap textures just so I can have a bookmark, a placeholder for my own thoughts to come back to and be like, okay, well, when I was looking at Google Earth and I was looking at the satellite imagery at some real life scrap plants, they've got everything, divided out and organized in such a way where it's probably steel in one pile, aluminum in another pile, and other unmagnetic stuff in another pile. So it's all very well sorted. So that was just for me to remember to do something like that. So when I go back and I actually start detailing stuff and adding piles of garbage and things like that, I will actually be able to remember that I wanted to have it all separated and organized. So back to my commentary about having like scenic divisions between industrial areas and roads. That's sort of what I'm going for right here, between this roadway and our industry here. And by the way, that road there on the right is, I guess, quote unquote, the main road. So I wanted to sort of do that, like build a main road and then build off of the main road, instead of like making the roads like an afterthought, which is sort of how I've built in the past. So really, flipping things around and just changing how I do things in terms of, I guess, when I do them. So at this point, now I'm bringing in some trees and some details. I want to fill into some of these areas. Again, trying to get these scenic divisions here. I don't want to fill every single square foot with warehouses and industry and power lines and stuff like that. I gotta have some scenic divisions and pockets of trees and stuff like that. So this is my attempt at doing that, and I do it very quickly over here. I just spammed down a bunch of these billboard trees just as filler, and then again I use my technique of billboard trees in the middle and then taking the 3D trees and putting them along the perimeter of it just to create an illusion of more 3D trees. Because the thing is, with these speed trees, if you forest a whole area with them, you're just gonna lag. It's just lag central. You just can't do it. So for the time being, unless there's some kind of optimization coming for speed trees or something in the future, that's probably the best way to do it. And that's how I'm going to try to continue to do it. And then at any point you want to convert those 2D trees into 3D speed trees, you just do a bulk update, edit, replace, whatever it's called. And you can replace them all, and with speed trees, and it's done just like that. Okay, so this is the last segment of our build here, and we're going to work on this little neighborhood here. And I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time detailing this neighborhood because it's really just a background scene, sort of in between these two industries. It doesn't need to have anything extravagant, so I left out like power lines and stop signs and things that I would ordinarily come in and detail. I didn't want to go crazy with that because I want to save those, all that rendering and those polygons and that kind of thing to detail the scenes that count. And those are the ones that are closer to the track. So that is something that I will probably just continue to do, and not necessarily detail so heavily and so extensively background scenes, because sometimes I almost did spend a lot of time detailing this. And the furthest that I went was putting driveways on all the houses, which even that was probably a stretch, but I couldn't plop those houses and not have at least the driveway there at all. So I had to at least do that. But as far as going a little bit further with those details, I don't think it's necessary because it's just going to drag the map down. And as it is, I'm already using so many grass assets and so many speed trees and so many other detail items that I just want to save. I want to save the rendering for that stuff, the important stuff. So that's my spiel about that. So here I'm just trying to get my palette of trees together and decide how I'm going to organize them. Again, this is just one of those things where you have to mess around with and make an executive creative decision about what trees and shrubs you want to use and what grasses you want to use and how you're going to sort of blend them together. I usually like to blend in my speed shrubs, or whatever they're called, the cust shrubs, and just bring them, halfway down into the ground and blend them in with some of this the spline grass. Spline grass is the best way to grass an area, in my opinion, because it hugs the terrain. You don't have to worry about anything floating. So I always recommend. I used to be so opposed to spline grass and shrubs, but now I'm all about it. So if you could use spline grass, that's really the best thing to use, just because it hugs the terrain, and it'll save yourself a ton of headaches. So here we are bringing in some more grass and like reed things. I used these on the Hudson and Western. I don't really know if they're like an aquatic grass or not, but they look similar enough to like reeds and things like that I've seen along the shoreline in the past. So I'm going to stick with it. I think that they look good. I should have put some pond scum in here, but I didn't, and I might have to come back and do it because I love my pond scum, on especially underneath bridges and areas where it can kind of build up like that. I think it adds a lot of texture and detail to it. So finally, coming up, I think we got another minute here of video before we get into the cinematics. Just for the purposes of the build, I just ran across this area, started spamming some trees down just to give you the guys a bit of an idea of like what I was doing here. And you know, it's just place trees, move them around, add some speed trees, add some grass, add some shrubs, rinse and repeat kind of deal. So that's all I wanted to do. This is just looking really cool with the bridges like that and everything. Big inspiration for me, I guess, is like Newark, New Jersey, and you know, the surrounding area, kind of like where I live. You go out into the Raritan Bay, and there's bridges all over the place, and that sort of thing. So I guess I had a lot of that in my head. But this is the end of the build video. We're going to get into some cool cinematics in just a moment. So I would like to take this moment to thank you guys so much for watching this episode and everything else. We'll be coming out with some more P&B episodes pretty soon. I'm getting back on board with this build. I think my last video was like 3 months ago or 4 months ago. It was like in July. So we're getting back into this build, and I hope you guys are excited as I am. I hope to make a lot of progress before the end of 2020, but we'll see how things go. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.